Well, I mean, you've got to go backwards and say what's actually causing the crisis, first of all. And that's, as I said, my analysis starts from the point of view that demand comes out of two sources in a capitalist economy. It comes out of the turnover of existing money, and it comes out of the addition of new money, which is created by banks lending.
Yep.
When the banks lend, as well as creating new money, you only borrow the money to spend it. So that borrowing money is also a source of demand. And that demand can turn up in two places. It can turn up in buying goods and services, or it can turn up in buying assets. So you have to combine together your analysis of the GDP, the macroeconomy, with asset markets, whereas conventional economic theory tries to hermetically seal the two from each other. So when you have that demand coming out of credit, and most of it's going into buying assets, you see total demand in the economy is the sum of your turnover of existing money plus this change in debt. Now, to measure what that is in total is difficult. Nobody records the turnover of existing money. What we do record is GDP. So GDP has, most of the demand in GDP comes out of turnover of existing money, some comes out of credit, but most of the additional credit goes to buy assets. So you can roughly add the two together to say that's your total demand in the economy. Now that gives us this trap that they've fallen into, which the mainstream economists will never get this, and central bankers are slowly learning it but resisting it at the same time. That gives you the trap that you can have a decline in demand even if both GDP and debt continue to rise. And this is what I've focused upon, because at the moment the reason we have the slowdown that's applying in Europe and America and England to some degree is that we have too much private debt and people don't want to take any more debt on, so credit growth is very low and therefore demand is low, because credit has been part of, a component of demand from the 1940s all the way through to now. So you can get out of that problem by using the government's capacity to create money to cancel that private debt and effectively go from having a strongly credit-based money system to more fiat-based. So that's helicopter money, but I'd use helicopter money to actually, the first use of it will be to pay down debt. So if you think about how the central bank creates money, the central bank creates money the government creates money by putting more money into your bank account through its spending than it takes out in taxes. That's how the government creates money. If the central bank and the government together said, we are going to make an injection into people's private bank accounts, where if they have debt, then the money is first used to write their debt off. But if anybody doesn't have debt, they get a cash injection. That would reduce the level of debt, increase the amount of fiat money in the economy, and reduce the debt burden very effectively. So it's a variation of helicopter money. So it could be done, but what will stop people doing it is, in a weird way, that they shouldn't tinker with the market system, despite the tinkering they're doing. So it would be, like if the Australian government, for example, did something like this back in 2008.
They did.
They didn't have any conditions on it, but they basically said anybody who's paid their taxes this year gets $1,000. Okay? And nobody questioned that. The money turned up in the accounts and people spent it. And a major reason why the Australian economy didn't have a recession that year was because people spent the money the government injected directly into their bank accounts. So it's quite easy to do. It could be done in such a way that it's backed by creation of government assets, not backed by government debt. Because again, people think the government has to borrow money in order to be able to spend. No, it doesn't. The government creates money by its spending. Rather than lending money to provide working capital for companies, which is a sensible reason to create money, certainly rather than creating money for entrepreneurs to invest, instead it's been giving people money to buy assets. Now that's giving you a positive feedback loop, because the rising amount of debt drives up asset prices, which encourages people to buy more assets, which has led to the bubbles and the crashes we've since had since that stage. So you need to reform the financial system so it no longer creates money to finance asset bubbles. You want to set it up in such a way that you can't make money, you can't profit from doing that. The only way to profit is by funding working capital for corporations, necessary consumption for workers, consumers when they need to buy larger items like cars or houses to live in rather than houses to speculate on, and then also fund entrepreneurs. So I see a whole range of changes that are needed. We have to tame the financial sector, and that's what the when you look at what central banks have been doing, they haven't been talking about taming the financial sector. They've been talking about preserving the financial sector from its own mistakes. Now, I think we have to see the financial sector as a good servant but a lousy master of capitalism, and we have to therefore reform it in such a way that we get it back to doing what it should do, which is provide that, the money we need for commerce in the physical economy.